My neighbor Karen cut down my fence because she wanted lake access. She thought she was so smart, using her police connections to get away with it. But Karen made one big mistake. She never checked who really owned the land she was walking on. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning I found my fence destroyed, I thought it was vandalism. 20 feet of beautiful cedar fencing lay scattered across my backyard like broken bones. 3 years of careful planning and weekend work, reduced to splinters overnight. I was wrong about the vandalism part. Oh good, you're awake. My neighbor Linda Parker called out cheerfully from what used to be the other side of my fence. She stood in my yard wearing her signature pink tracksuit and holding a steaming coffee mug. I hope you don't mind, but I had that old fence removed. It was blocking my access to the lake. I stared at her in disbelief. You, what? The fence, Linda repeated as if explaining to a child. It was in my way. I need to get to the water for my morning walks. Property owners have rights, you know. My property sat on 2 acres of prime lakefront land that I'd inherited from my grandfather. The fence marked the exact boundary between my land and Linda's smaller lot. She lived in a massive modern house that her late husband had built, but her property only extended about 50 feet from her back door before hitting my boundary line. Linda, that fence was on my property. You had no right to. Actually, I checked with my lawyer, she interrupted, sipping her coffee like we were discussing the weather. There are laws about blocking access to public waterways. That fence was illegal. Heat rushed to my face. The lake isn't public access from your property. You'd need to go through the public boat launch like everyone else. Linda's smile turned cold. Well, that's not convenient for me, is it? I'm a senior citizen. I shouldn't have to drive 2 miles just to take my constitutional walks. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, dear. My son-in-law is Detective Parker. He'll explain the access laws to you. My heart sank. I'd forgotten that Linda's daughter had married into the local police force. In a small town like Millbrook, family connections meant everything. Look, Linda continued, I'm not unreasonable. You can rebuild your fence, but it needs to be set back 20 feet to allow proper access. It's only fair. 20 feet would put the new fence line directly through the middle of my garden and workshop. I'd lose half my usable backyard. That's not happening, I said firmly. Linda's friendly mask slipped completely. Then I guess we have a problem. Because I'm not walking 2 miles to the boat launch when there's perfectly good water access right here. She turned and marched back toward her house, leaving me standing among the ruins of my fence. That was the beginning of the worst 6 months of my life. I called the police just as Linda had suggested. Detective Parker, her son-in-law, showed up 3 hours later. He was a thin man with shifty eyes who clearly didn't want to be there. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, he said, barely glancing at the destroyed fence. But Mrs. Parker does have some valid points about waterway access. These property disputes can get complicated. She destroyed my fence without permission. That's vandalism at minimum. Well, that depends on interpretation. If the fence was blocking legal access. He shrugged. Look, why don't you two work it out between yourselves? Neighbor to neighbor? I realized then that I was on my own. Linda had connections, money, and time. I had none of those things. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, barely making enough to cover my mortgage and bills. My grandfather had left me the land, but he'd also left me the property taxes, maintenance costs, and all the headaches that came with owning lakefront real estate. Linda, on the other hand, was loaded. Her late husband had owned 3 successful car dealerships. She had nothing but time and money to make my life miserable, and she seemed determined to use both. The harassment started immediately. Linda began taking her constitutional walks through my backyard every morning at 6 a.m. She'd stomp across my garden, knocking over plants and leaving muddy footprints on my patio. When I confronted her, she'd smile sweetly and remind me about public access rights. Next came the parties. Linda had never been social before, but suddenly she was hosting loud gatherings that went late into the night. The music, laughter, and car doors slamming kept me awake until 2 a.m. When I called to complain, she'd apologize insincerely and promise to try to keep it down. But the noise would start again the next weekend. The final straw came when Linda installed floodlights along her property line, massive, commercial-grade lights that she claimed were for security purposes. She positioned them to shine directly into my bedroom window. I had to buy blackout curtains just to sleep. This has to stop, I told her during one of her morning trespassing sessions. You're making my life hell. I don't know what you mean, Linda replied innocently. I'm just exercising my rights as a property owner. Maybe if you'd been more reasonable about the fence situation, we wouldn't have these conflicts. That's when I realized what she was really doing. Linda wanted my property. The fence dispute wasn't about access. It was about driving me out so she could buy my land cheap. She was banking on me getting frustrated enough to sell. She had no idea who she was dealing with. My grandfather hadn't just left me the land, he'd also left me his detailed records of every property transaction in Millbrook dating back 40 years. Grandpa Joe had been the town's surveyor and had an obsession with documentation that bordered on the extreme. I spent the next month digging through his files, learning everything I could about local property law and Linda's background. What I discovered made me very, very angry. Linda's husband hadn't just owned car dealerships. He'd been involved in several shady real estate deals that had forced out longtime residents. The couple had a pattern of buying up lakefront properties by harassing the owners into selling. More importantly, I found something in Grandpa Joe's surveys that Linda clearly didn't know about. Her property taxes were wrong. They had been for 15 years. According to Grandpa Joe's original survey, Linda's lot was actually 15 feet smaller than what the county had on record. A clerical error during a 2008 property line update had incorrectly expanded her official boundaries, reducing her tax assessment by thousands of dollars per year. But here's the interesting part. If the county corrected the error, they wouldn't just adjust future taxes. They'd want back taxes for the entire 15-year period, plus penalties and interest. I calculated the total, $47,000. I sat on this information for 2 weeks, planning my next move carefully. Linda continued her harassment campaign, seemingly confident that she was wearing me down. She started bringing friends on her morning walks, turning my backyard into a social gathering spot. Sarah seems upset about something, I heard her tell Mrs. Goldman from down the street. I've tried to be neighborly, but some people just don't appreciate community spirit. That's when I made my move. I contacted the county assessor's office and requested a formal property survey review. I presented Grandpa Joe's original documentation and pointed out the discrepancy in Linda's lot size. The county took it very seriously. Within a week, they'd sent their own surveyor to confirm the boundaries. Linda watched from her kitchen window as officials marked the correct property lines with bright orange spray paint. The new markers were 15 feet closer to her house than the old ones. 2 days later, Linda received a certified letter from the county. I knew because I saw the mail carrier deliver it, and I watched Linda's face through her kitchen window as she read it. Her scream was loud enough to hear through my closed windows. Linda stormed over to my house 20 minutes later, waving the letter like a weapon. "You did this," she shrieked. "You vindictive little witch. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I opened my door calmly. I reported a property tax error to the appropriate authorities. It's called being a good citizen. They want $47,000. In back taxes. Plus penalties. "Wow, that's a lot," I said sympathetically. "Good thing you've been so fiscally responsible all these years. I'm sure you have that kind of money saved up." Linda's face turned purple. "This is harassment. This is revenge." "No, Linda. Harassment is destroying someone's fence. Harassment is trespassing through their yard every day. Harassment is keeping them awake with noise and floodlights. This is just making sure everyone pays their fair share of taxes. I'll fight this. My lawyer will. Your lawyer will tell you that property taxes are based on actual lot size, not clerical errors. The county has every right to collect what you owe." Linda opened and closed her mouth like a fish, clearly realizing she had no legal ground to stand on. "You can't afford this," she finally said. "I know your situation. You're broke. When I sue you for harassment, you'll lose everything." That's when I smiled. "Sue me for what? Reporting accurate property information? Good luck with that." Linda stormed off, but I knew this wasn't over. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to find my mailbox destroyed. Someone had driven a baseball bat through it repeatedly, leaving it in twisted pieces. Linda was taking her morning walk when I discovered it, and she had the audacity to wave cheerfully. "Oh my, what happened to your mailbox?" she called out. "You should really report that to the police. So much crime these days." I did report it. Detective Parker showed up and took a statement with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. He didn't even dust for fingerprints. "Probably just kids," he concluded. "Not much we can do without witnesses." That afternoon, my garden sprinklers were mysteriously broken. Someone had cut the lines in multiple places, flooding my flower beds and killing weeks of work. The day after that, my car tires were slashed. Linda was escalating and I was running out of money to keep up with the damage. Worse, I was starting to doubt myself. Maybe I should just sell and move somewhere peaceful. Then I got the phone call that changed everything. Miss Chin? This is Robert Martinez from Millbrook County Tax Services. I'm calling about Mrs. Parker's property tax situation. What about it? Well, she's requested a payment plan for her back taxes, but she's also indicated she might not be able to meet even those reduced payments. The county is considering placing a tax lien on her property. My pulse quickened. What does that mean exactly? If she can't pay within 90 days, the property goes to auction to recover the taxes owed. I thought you might be interested since you're an adjacent property owner. You'd have first right of refusal. I nearly dropped the phone. You mean I could buy her property? Well, you'd be bidding on the tax lien. If you win, you'd essentially own the debt. Mrs. Parker would have 1 year to pay you back with interest. If she can't, the property becomes yours. After hanging up, I sat in my destroyed garden and started laughing. Linda's harassment campaign was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. I had exactly $52,000 in my savings account, money I'd been hoarding for years to eventually renovate my grandfather's old cabin. It was supposed to be my emergency fund, my security blanket. Now it was going to be my weapon. I spent the next month researching tax lien auctions and property law. The process was surprisingly straightforward. Linda owed $47,000 in back taxes. The county would auction the lien to the highest bidder. Whoever won would have the right to collect the debt plus 18% annual interest. If Linda couldn't pay within 1 year, the lien holder could foreclose and take ownership of the property. Linda, meanwhile, was clearly struggling. I noticed her Range Rover had been replaced by an older Honda. The weekly parties stopped. Even her morning harassment walks became less frequent. She was running out of money. 3 weeks before the auction, Linda swallowed her pride and knocked on my door. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said. Gone was the confident, aggressive woman who destroyed my fence. She looked tired and desperate. "What can I do for you, Linda? I know we've had our differences, but we're neighbors. We should be able to work things out like civilized people." I almost laughed. After months of harassment, she wanted to be civilized. "I'm listening," I said. "This tax situation, it's a misunderstanding. The county is being unreasonable. But I'm willing to compromise about the fence. We can put it back exactly where it was. I'll even pay for the materials." "That's generous," I replied. "But I'm not sure how that helps with your tax problem." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "Look, I know you're the one who reported the property line issue. If you could just tell them you made a mistake, that your grandfather's survey was wrong, I'll make it worth your while." "You want me to lie to the county assessor?" "I want you to be reasonable. This whole thing is ridiculous. $47,000 over 15 feet of land. It's not about the land, Linda. It's about paying what you owe in taxes. You've been essentially stealing from the county for 15 years. "Stealing?" Linda's voice rose. "That's absurd. It was a clerical error. An error that you never reported even though you knew your lot size was wrong. You've been getting services and infrastructure funded by other people's tax money." Linda stared at me for a long moment. "How much do you want?" "Excuse me? To make this go away. How much money do you want? 10,000? 20? Now I did laugh. "Linda, you think this is about money?" "Everything's about money," she snapped, her mask slipping completely. "So name your price. What's it going to take?" "It's going to take you paying your fair share of taxes like everyone else. That's how society works." Linda's face flushed red. "You sanctimonious little bitch. You think you're so moral, but you're just getting revenge because I outsmarted you with the fence." "Outsmarted me? You destroyed my property and then harassed me for months. That's not outsmarting, that's being a bully. I offered you a reasonable compromise and you refused. So I found another way to get what I wanted. That's called being smart. And now I found a way to get what I want. That's called consequences." Linda stormed off, and I knew any chance of peaceful resolution was gone. The auction was held on a rainy Tuesday morning in the county courthouse basement. I'd expected a crowd, but only 4 people showed up. Myself, an elderly man who turned out to be a professional tax lien investor, a young couple looking for cheap property, and Linda's lawyer. Linda herself wasn't there. I later learned she was at the bank, desperately trying to secure a loan against her house. The auctioneer was a bored-looking county employee who clearly wanted to get through this quickly. "Property tax lien for 247 Lakeshore Drive," he announced. "Starting bid is $47,000. The elderly investor bid first. $47,000. I raised my hand. 50,000. The young couple looked at their paperwork and shook their heads. This was already more than they could afford. 51, said the investor. 55, I countered. We went back and forth for several minutes. The investor was good at this. He knew exactly how high he could go and still make a profit. But he didn't know what I knew, that this wasn't about profit for me. When the bidding hit 58,000, the investor hesitated. 60,000, I said firmly. The investor studied me for a moment, then shook his head. Too rich for my blood. 60,000 going once, going twice, sold to bidder number 3. Just like that, I owned Linda Parker's tax debt. The implications were huge. Linda now owed me $60,000 plus 18% annual interest. If she couldn't pay within 1 year, I could foreclose and take her property. A property worth at least $300,000. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I'd just won the lottery. Linda was waiting for me in the parking lot. You spiteful little worm, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I bought a tax lien at a legal auction. It's all perfectly above board. This is harassment. This is targeted harassment, and I'm going to prove it. Good luck with that. You have 1 year to pay me $60,000 plus interest. That's about $65,000 total. I'll accept cash, certified check, or money order. Linda's hands were shaking with rage. I'll fight this. I'll sue you. I'll make your life hell. More hell than you've already made it? Linda, for the past 6 months, you've trespassed on my property, destroyed my fence, kept me awake with noise, flooded my garden with floodlights, and vandalized my mailbox and car. What exactly are you going to do that's worse? You'll what? Because here's the thing, Linda. I now have a legal interest in your property. If you damage my car again or destroy my mailbox or trespass on my land, I can claim that you're damaging the collateral for your debt. That would give me grounds to demand immediate payment. Linda opened and closed her mouth silently. The harassment stops now, I continued. No more walking through my yard. No more loud parties. No more floodlights. You're going to be the perfect neighbor for the next year while you figure out how to pay what you owe. And if I don't? I smiled. Then in 12 months I'll own your house. The change in Linda was immediate and dramatic. The morning walk stopped completely. The floodlights were turned off. When she saw me outside, she'd hurry back into her house like I was contagious. I rebuilt my fence exactly where it had been originally, and Linda didn't say a word. For the first time in months I could sleep through the night. My garden started recovering. I even installed security cameras to prevent any future vandalism. Linda, meanwhile, was clearly desperate. I saw her meeting with multiple real estate agents, trying to figure out if she could sell her house quickly enough to pay off the lien. But the housing market was slow, and she owed more on her mortgage than I'd initially realized. 2 months after the auction, Linda's lawyer contacted me. Mrs. Parker would like to discuss a payment arrangement, he said. She's prepared to offer $15,000 immediately and monthly payments for the remainder. I considered it. $15,000 was better than nothing, and monthly payments would give me steady income. But something made me hesitate. What kind of monthly payments? I asked. $500 per month. I did the math quickly. At $500 per month, it would take Linda over 8 years to pay off the debt, assuming no additional interest. That wasn't acceptable. Tell Mrs. Parker that I require payment in full within the 1-year deadline, as specified in the tax lien process. No payment plans. Linda's lawyer sounded surprised. Miss Chin, that's quite inflexible. Surely you can see the benefit of guaranteed monthly income over. The benefit to me is following the legal process exactly as outlined. Mrs. Parker has 1 year. If she can't pay, the property reverts to me. After I hung up, I realized something important. I didn't want Linda's money anymore. I wanted her house. The idea had been growing in my mind for weeks. Linda's property was twice the size of mine and had a much newer house. Combined with my grandfather's land, I'd have nearly 4 acres of prime lakefront real estate. I could renovate Linda's house and turn my grandfather's cabin into a guest house or rental property. The combined properties would be worth well over $500,000. All I had to do was wait. Linda tried everything over the next few months. She attempted to refinance her house, but her credit had been damaged by the tax lien. She put the property on the market, but couldn't find a buyer willing to purchase a house with a $65,000 lien attached. She even tried to get the county to reverse the tax assessment, claiming the original survey was wrong. But Grandpa Joe's documentation was too thorough. The county confirmed that Linda had indeed been underpaying taxes for 15 years. By month 8, Linda was showing signs of real desperation. I saw her crying on her porch one afternoon, talking on the phone with someone who was clearly refusing to help her. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered my destroyed fence, my slashed tires, my flooded garden, and all the sleepless nights caused by her harassment campaign. Linda had chosen to be a bully. Now she was learning that bullies sometimes pick the wrong target. Month 10 brought an unexpected development. Linda knocked on my door one evening, looking haggard and defeated. "Sarah, please. I'm begging you. I'll give you everything I have, $30,000 and the deed to my car. Just forgive the rest of the debt." I studied her face. The confident, aggressive woman who destroyed my fence was gone. In her place stood someone broken and desperate. $30,000 isn't $65,000, Linda. It's all I have. I've sold everything else. My jewelry, my furniture, my husband's watch collection. I've borrowed against my retirement account. There's nothing left. You could get a job, I suggested. Linda's face flushed. I'm 68 years old. Who's going to hire me? Walmart. McDonald's. There are plenty of places that hire seniors. You might have to work for a few years, but you could earn the money. You expect me to flip burgers to pay you off? I expect you to take responsibility for your actions. You destroyed my property, harassed me for months, and tried to steal my land through intimidation. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Linda stared at me for a long moment. You've become just as bad as me. No, Linda. I've become smarter than you. 2 weeks before the one-year deadline, Linda made her final play. She contacted a local TV news station and told them a sob story about an evil neighbor using tax liens to steal her home. The reporter, a young woman fresh out of journalism school, called me for comment. "Miss Chin, how do you respond to allegations that you're using a technicality to force an elderly woman from her home?" I'd been expecting this call. I'd respond that Mrs. Parker owes $65,000 in back taxes and interest. I purchased her tax lien at a legal public auction. She has had 11 months to arrange payment and has failed to do so. But don't you think there's a moral obligation to show mercy to a senior citizen? Where was Mrs. Parker's moral obligation when she destroyed my fence? When she trespassed on my property daily? When she vandalized my mailbox and slashed my tires? When she kept me awake with noise and floodlights? There was silence on the other end of the line. You see, I continued, Mrs. Parker didn't contact you because she's a victim. She contacted you because she's finally facing consequences for her actions, and she doesn't like it. The story never aired. On the final day of the one-year deadline, Linda Parker moved out of her house. I watched from my window as the moving truck loaded her remaining possessions. She looked small and old, nothing like the imperious woman who'd once tried to bully me off my own land. As the truck pulled away, Linda stood on the sidewalk staring at her former home. For a moment our eyes met across the yards. I thought she might say something, a final curse, a threat, even an apology. Instead, she just shook her head and walked away. The next morning, I walked through my new property for the first time as its owner. Linda's house was beautiful, modern, spacious, with huge windows overlooking the lake. Combined with my grandfather's rustic cabin, I now own the most valuable residential property in Millbrook. I found myself standing in Linda's former kitchen, looking out at the lake where this whole mess had started. The irony wasn't lost on me. Linda had destroyed my fence to gain access to the water, and now I owned both properties and all the lake access that came with them. My phone buzzed with a text from my real estate agent. Congratulations on the new property. Conservative estimate puts the combined value at $750,000. Interested in listing the Parker house? I smiled and typed back, not yet. I think I'll enjoy the extra space for a while. That evening I sat on Linda's spacious deck, my spacious deck now, watching the sunset over the lake. The water was calm and peaceful, reflecting the sky like a mirror. I thought about my grandfather, who'd spent 40 years carefully documenting every property transaction in Millbrook. His obsessive record-keeping had seemed pointless at the time, but it had ultimately saved my home and given me a new life. I thought about Linda, probably living in some small apartment now, bitter and angry about losing everything. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd become the kind of person who destroyed lives over money and pride. Then I remembered that first morning when I'd found my fence destroyed, and Linda standing in my yard with her coffee mug and her entitled smile. She'd chosen to be a bully. She'd escalated every conflict, rejected every compromise, and tried to force me from my home through harassment and intimidation. I hadn't destroyed Linda Parker. Linda Parker had destroyed herself. The difference was that I'd been smart enough to let her do it. As the stars came out over the lake, I raised my wine glass in a silent toast. Here's to consequences, Grandpa Joe. And here's to keeping good records. The lake lapped gently against the shore, and for the first time in over a year, everything was peaceful in my corner of the world.